Ugh. Hey, fourth grade, it's me, Miss Bergman, coming to you from my basement in my room. This is Miss Bergman's reading nook. Welcome. Just because there is a virus out there and we all have to stay home, that doesn't mean that we can't have library time. So, check out Miss Bergman. She's got her Gryffindor sweatshirt and her Gryffindor PJs. We're cozy. We've got our pillows. Oh, we're getting all nice and ready. And we've got our book, Bookwanderers. I'm going to back up a couple pages, maybe like a page or so that everyone, we're on like it's like a good starting point, like back up a little bit at a good starting point. So we're not just like starting right in the middle. Oh. Got to get cozy in my chair here. All right. So if we remember, we're reading Bookwanderers, and Oscar has just left the bookstore with his book report book for his, you got to read a book over spring break or Christmas break. I don't know what break this is. They don't really go into it. It's the holiday break. Anyway, Oscar thanked Granddad and gave Tilly an awkward half wave before making his way back across the road to Crumbs. Tilly headed upstairs to her reading nook, but when she turned the corner, she saw that her sofa was already occupied by a girl with red pigtails. She looked up at Tilly as she approached and sighed dramatically. "I know what you must be thinking," she said in an accent that Tilly couldn't place. "You're thinking what a dreadful burden it must be for a girl who is already so skinny to be forced to endure red hair as well." "I wasn't thinking that at all," Tilly said. "I was just wondering what you're doing on my sofa." "Oh, I'm so awfully sorry," the girl said, jumping up and haphazardly straightening the cushions. "I didn't know it was yours." "I mean, it's not really," Tilly said, realizing that she must have seemed rude. "It's just where I like to sit and read, and you surprised me. I hadn't noticed you when I was up here with with a boy from school." "Oh, I know that feeling," the girl said, smiling broadly. "I have a tree that is laden with the most beautiful, sweet-smelling, pale pink blossoms that I like to read under." The girl's face suddenly morphed into a look of horror. "Well, could you ever forgive me?" "Forgive you? For what?" Tilly said, thoroughly flummoxed at the change in tone. "My horrible manners. I haven't even introduced myself. My name is Anne, with an E." "With an E?" Tilly repeated hazily. "Yes, the E is ever so important. People are always telling me that the name is much the same, with or without the E, but I think those people are severely lacking in imagination. How could you ever think that Anne without an E was the same as Anne with an E? It's like saying, it's like saying that dessert is the same as desert. But there I go again with my terrible manners. Oh, wait, let me guess. You look like an Emmeline, or maybe a Penelope, or Cordelia," she added, sounding hopeful. It's just Tilly, I'm afraid, short for Matilda Pages." "Why, that is a lovely name, and I am quite envious," Anne said, looking entirely delighted. "I am so thrilled to meet you." "Are you looking for a book?" Tilly asked. "That sounds wonderful, thank you," Anne said. "Autumn is the most magical time of the year for reading, don't you think?" She gestured toward the window, which framed only drizzle and gray skies, but Anne reacted as though she could see auburn leaves tumbling in the wind. "October is my absolute favorite month, and to read outside with the sun dappling." "Do you think dappling is a real word, Tilly? I think it must be, don't you? With the sun dappling the leaves of a tree, a glass of raspberry cordial in hand." She trailed off, staring dreamily into nothing. Tilly began to find the silence a little awkward, but struggled to think of something to say, and so she returned to her fail-safe question. "What's your favorite story?" she asked, jerking Anne out of her autumnal daze. Do stories you've made up yourself count? Asked Anne. I don't think so, said Tilly. I think they have to be, well, proper stories, like in a book. A story you've made up yourself is just as proper, don't you think? Although I suppose it is harder to share with other people unless it's written down. But I do love telling stories out loud as well. My friend Diana and I have a club where we read each other our stories and offer helpful advice on how to improve as writers. I must say, though, the advice is mainly one way. Poor Diana. She doesn't have much of an imagination, although I love her fiercely regardless. I dare say it is good for my soul to be bosom friends with a girl who is lacking in imagination powers. The mention of a friend named Diana made Tilly's brain itch. Something about this girl was so familiar. But anyway, it must depend on what the purpose of your story is, I suppose, Anne concluded, and looked up triumphantly. Tilly nodded supportively, although she wasn't really very sure what Anne's point was. Do you know, Tilly started, glancing down at the book in her hand, you remind me of... But she was interrupted by a harried-looking man who came up behind them and tapped Tilly on the shoulder imperiously. Excuse me, young lady. I need to pay for this immediately. Do you work here? He was holding a very thick business textbook. Ugh. Not really, Tilly said, trying not to laugh as Anne impersonated the man's cross face behind his back. But I'll go and find my granddad. He owns the shop. The man nodded curtly. I'll be right back, Tilly said to Anne. I don't trust you to come straight back, Missy. I'll come with you. I have an incredibly important meeting to get to urgently, the man said, and Tilly couldn't be bothered to explain that she wasn't talking to him. She delivered him to Granddad, who took him to the till, but when Tilly went back upstairs, she couldn't see Anne anywhere. She ran down to find Granddad after the grumpy customer had gone. Ah, Tilly, just the person I was looking for. Don't forget we need some of your inspiration for the Wonderland party later. I've been wondering if we could possibly try to... He paused, noticing how distracted she was. What's up, sweetheart? Did you see a girl come past here a few minutes ago? She asked. No, afraid not, love. Was she a friend from school? No, just a customer, I think. She seemed nice, though. I thought she might have stuck around for a bit, Tilly said. I can't find her, though. She probably had to go and meet her parents, Tills, Granddad said gently. Maybe she'll pop back in later. I'll keep an eye out for her if she comes in. What does she look like? She had red hair in 2 plaits, Tilly said. It was funny, actually. She really reminded me of Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables. And her name was Anne, too. Such a weird coincidence. Maybe it's like owners and their dogs, she joked. You start seeing your favorite characters in real people. Although that's not quite right with the dog thing, is it? She tailed off, noticing Granddad's face had gone pale. Are you okay? Should I go get Grandma? Do you need a cup of tea? No, love. I'm fine. No, Granddad reassured her. Just a wobbly moment. Been on my feet for too long this morning, I think. I will take you up on that cup of tea, though, and I'll just have a sit down behind here for a moment. I'll be right as rain before you know it. The color was already returning to his cheeks as Tilly left to make the tea. Ooh, I wonder what made Granddad go so pale. Do you think he knows she's seeing people who aren't really there? Chapter 5. Magic, Mischief, and Nonsense. While the kettle boiled, Tilly seized the chance to run upstairs to her room and dig out her mom's copy of Alice in Wonderland, tucking Mary's photo inside the cover. Remember, Mary's photo is the one with her mom and Mary, Bee and Mary sitting together. They're both pregnant and they're both reading a book together on the couch. It's super sweet. Granddad wasn't at the till when she returned with the tea. She tracked him down in the corner of the shop that they rather grandly called the office, although it was really just a desk tucked into a corner of the 4th floor, where customers didn't venture as regularly. As she headed toward the office, a sweet, smoky smell lingered in the air, one that got stronger as she got closer to the desk. alongside a murmur of voices. Someone very posh was responding languidly to Granddad's questions, and as Tilly rounded the corner, she saw a tall, elegant man in an expensive-looking gray coat sitting opposite Granddad. Just so you guys know, posh means like rich and elegant, and languidly means like lazily, like I'm so rich I don't even have to look up so much. I don't even have to open my eyes. To Tilly's surprise, he was smoking a black pipe, which was the cause of the sweet scent in the air, and he was wearing an odd hat with a flap on each side, even though it was always cozy inside the shop. I wonder, who smokes a pipe with an odd hat with flaps? And he has a gray coat. I don't mean to be rude, but I don't think you should be smoking in here, she said, putting down Granddad's cup. The man and Granddad stopped talking abruptly and stared at her before turning to look at each other. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your meeting, Granddad, Tilly said, instantly worried she'd been too terse with someone who looked decidedly important. I just wanted to ask you something, but I'll come back later. Granddad nodded mutely, and Tilly went back downstairs. But only a few moments later, she heard her name being called. Tilly! Granddad's voice came down the stairs. Wait for me a second, will you? Tilly paused, so Granddad could catch up with her. Sorry about that, love, he said, back to his usual self. I was just deep in conversation and entirely forgot I'd asked for that cup of tea. Sorry if I was strange with you. You know how I can get. Can't concentrate on more than one thing at a time. It's okay, Tilly said. Who was that anyway? And why were you letting him smoke? Granddad looked sheepish. He looked shy. He's an old friend, and he likes doing things his way. So I let the rules slide for him and turn a blind eye. I know it's ill-advised. I can't seem to turn a corner in this place without interrupting someone else's conversation, Tilly said. What on earth do you mean, sweetheart? Granddad asked. I barged in on Grandma catching up with a friend yesterday, too, Tilly said, and that lady vanished as soon as I interrupted. I just seemed to make everything awkward. Which lady was that? Granddad asked slowly. I think she was called Lizzie, Tilly said. Grandma said she reminded her of Mom. Granddad took a deep breath and smiled warmly at Tilly. Oh, enough reminiscing. What were you coming to ask me about? Tilly showed him the book she still had tucked under her arm. Alice in Wonderland. Perfect research for the party. Can you believe we've never had an Alice theme before in all our years of autumn parties? It's one of Mom's, Tilly explained, passing it to Granddad, who opened the cover automatically and saw the photo that Tilly had shown him yesterday. He stilled for a fraction of a moment before placing his palm on the photo, like it was the cheek of a child. It's a lovely connection to have, isn't it? Granddad said, holding the photo up to his glasses. Having the same book she's reading in the photo. She loved Alice in Wonderland, too, he said, closing the book and pointing at the cover. Do you know why she liked them so much? Tilly said, remembering her decision to try to find out more about her mother's taste in books. Well, as I said before, she always felt a personal connection to a little princess, Granddad said carefully. And why do any of us love Alice's adventures in Wonderland? Magic, mischief, nonsense, all the good stuff. I wish I could talk to her about it, Tilly said. Me too, sweetheart, Granddad said. Me too. He looked into her eyes quite seriously for a moment before an extravagant stomach rumble invaded the silence. Well then, I suppose I'd best check on lunch. It'll be ready soon. Pop down before too long. He gave her a kiss on the top of her head and set off toward the kitchen. Tilly found the nearest chair, sat down, and began reading the familiar first few sentences. Soon she was lost in Wonderland as Alice, reassured by the scenes and characters she knew so well, and soothed by knowing that her mother had made the same journey years before. Chapter 6. Trouble always starts when you're out of proportion with whom you are talking to. After a lunch of creamy leek and potato soup with chunks of homemade bread and salty butter, Tilly headed out to find Jack, ready to beg or steal something sweet. Remember, Jack is the 19-year-old baker down in the little cafe in Pages and Company. But before she made it to Jack's cafe at the back of the ground floor, she was struck on the forehead by a jelly bean. Turning in the direction it had come from, she saw a girl in a full-skirted blue dress sitting on the stairs, lazily throwing jelly beans toward the nearest bookcase. "Did I hit you? I'm sorry. I was aiming for the cat. Does it have a name? Do you think it likes sweets?" Tilly stared at her, and the girl widened her eyes in impatience. "The cat? What's it called?" "Oh, the cat. Sorry, the cat. What's it called? My cat is called Dinah." "She's called Al." The girl looked directly at her, and Tilly felt that little itch in her brain. "Alice? She's called Alice." "You don't seem very sure about it," the girl said, looking at Tilly. "Oh, but never mind that, because my name is Alice, too. How curious." "Alice?" Tilly repeated. "Yes, Alice," she said again slowly. "And what is your name?" "Matilda," Tilly interrupted. "Well, whatever your name is, there is always time for good manners. It's very rude to interrupt." "I'm sorry," Tilly said. "It's nice to meet you, Alice. Would you like a cup of tea, maybe?" "No, nice to meet you, Matilda," Alice replied, and bobbed a neat curtsy. Tilly tried to copy, but just ended up doing a small, awkward bow. "And thank you, but no thank you. I don't tend to eat or drink in new places until I've thoroughly got my bearings." Alice looked Tilly up and down. "We both seem to be around the same size, though, which is a good sign. Trouble always starts when you are out of proportion with whom you are talking to." "Are you looking for a book?" Tilly asked. "Not especially, although I'm never averse to finding a book along my way. They can come in handy sometimes, except you never know what's inside until it's too late in my experience." She sighed extravagantly. "Do you know, someone once told me that explanations take such a dreadfully long time that one should focus on adventures, and I've rather come around to their way of thinking. So, if you'll excuse me." And with that, Alice skipped toward the back of the bookshop, passing a round little man with a very neat mustache who was coming the other way. The little man gave no indication of having seen her, but gave a neat bow in Tilly's direction. "Excusez-moi, mademoiselle." Tilly's head spun, but as she turned round to watch the man leaving, she found herself face to face with the red-headed girl from that morning. They stared at each other. "You!" the girl said, sounding surprised. "You!" said Tilly. "You're back. You seem so familiar to me from somewhere. What school did you go to?" The girl tilted her head to one side and stared at Tilly. "I go to school in Avonlea," she said, "near my home at Green Gables." "And your name is Anne," Tilly said slowly. "With an E," Anne reminded her. "Anne with an E from Green Gables." "Anne from Green Gables?" The girl nodded, still openly staring at Tilly. "But who are you?" "I'm Tilly with a Y, from here." "But you remember me, and now I am here, I remember you," Anne said in wonder. "As I said, we literally met this morning," Tilly repeated. "But how can you be Anne of Green Gables? She's not a real person." "Well, I'm absolutely really here," she said, reaching out and touching Tilly gently on the arm. "Is this a joke?" Tilly said, looking behind her as if she would see hidden cameras somewhere or wondering if she was part of some elaborate setup by Granddad to entertain her during the holidays. You're from a story? Why, yes, Anne replied happily, not seeming at all perturbed by this fact and settling herself on the stairs. Okay, you're real, but you're not real. You're from a book, but you're here, Tilly said, feeling like her brain wasn't quite keeping up with what was happening in front of her. Well, why on earth does being from a book mean I'm not real? Asked Anne. I'm as real as you, or this shop, or Julius Caesar, or the Lady of Shalott. You can touch my hair if you'd like, and you will see it is ever so real to my eternal frustration. Tilly had to admit that Anne's physical presence was undeniable. Right, Tilly said, sitting down next to Anne, determined to wrap some logic around what seemed to be happening. Well, what were you doing in Green Gables before you came here? How did you get out? I was sitting in the orchard, imagining all the places I might visit when I'm older. And then I was here. But how? Tilly was almost bursting with frustration. I don't know. I just was. I think it is rather marvelous. If you like, I can invent a thrilling story about how I got here with magic spells and a glittering portal, maybe some kind of benevolent but cursed princess living in a tower who writes poetry and is allowed only a single glass of water each day. Tilly interrupted her before she got even more carried away. But how will you get back? Won't there be gaps in your book, spoiling your story somehow, you being here? I'll just go back after I am here. And I don't think it can spoil my story. I rather think only I can spoil my own story. Tilly sighed and put her head on her knees. Ugh. And then thought of something. Did you see the other girl who was here? She asked. Alice? But when she raised her head, Anne was no longer there. Wow. Ooh. That's where we're going to stop, guys. This book is getting so good. How does Anne just pop up out of nowhere in the house? Do you think it's because, and Alice only came because she was reading Alice in Wonderland and she was reading Anne of Green Gables before. Do you think that's the only way that they could come out is because she reads them and then they pop out? Ooh, magic. Oh, and if you guys are confused and want to know, like, there's some pictures here inside the book. I didn't want to like stop and show you, but here's a picture of the man with the smoking pipe. Does he look familiar to anyone? Huh. I wonder who he is. So, I wonder, can Granddad and Grandma do the same thing that is happening to Tilly? Alright guys, stay healthy, wash your hands, go outside and make snowmen and do some sledding. Sledding is fun because it's snowing outside today. I hope you guys have a great time at home. Stay busy, do some reading, grab a book. You can always, TV in your head. That's what a book is. So I hope you guys had some fun listening to me read to you at home. See you guys next time. Bye.